Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to The Last Cast, HBO's unofficial The Last of Us recap podcast. This show, hosted each week by me, Jack, and Andrew,
Hello.
will take a deeper look into the mega TV series event, The Last of Us. We'll break down, assess, compare, contrast, and have a little bit of fun as we go, because that's kind of our style. So grab yourself a cup of Joel's favorite blend, and let's get on with it.
Okay. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
We were talking before the show. It's a little nerve-wracking for us.
Yes.
This right now.
Yeah, it is.
For maybe no good reason, right? We've been talking about The Last of Us for a pretty long time now.
Yes. And in that same vein. So, hello, everybody. Welcome. If you are new to me and Andrew as podcasters, if you're new to The Last of Us, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. But first and foremost, we have a Last of Us podcast named Wayfaring Strangers. And this has been going on for well over a year now. We are 50 episodes deep, I believe. With 35 episodes in bonus shows. There's a whole lot going on that channel. But we exclusively talk about The Last of Us. We are covering the games one subsection of a chapter at a time, not even one chapter at a time, a subsection of a chapter at a time. And having an amazing time doing it, meeting so many people, creating a wonderful Last of Us community. And if that is something you're interested in, we would love to have you a part of it. It's Wayfaring Strangers, the unofficial Last of Us podcast. But if you're here because you're just watching the show, you have no interest in the game, we welcome you as well. This will be a spoiler-free show, so you do not have to worry about, like, oh crap, are they going to give away the ending of the whole story? No, we're not going to do that.
Also, there's a chance that we don't really even know. They've changed enough in just this first episode that, or even fleshed out things that we're not really sure how it's going to go. Yeah. So our knowledge of the game doesn't necessarily mean we will have an understanding of where the show goes, which is kind of nice.
It is kind of nice. There's a little bit of, I think that's what we're feeling right now, that like nervous, anticipatory energy. I don't know. Like, I know that this is just going to reach more people beyond the games and people into the games too. So it's like a twofold thing happening here. And that's where my nerves are coming from.
Okay. But, well, I think we're going to be fine.
Yes. I at the end of the day, I agree. And cheers. Cheers. I have water, so I'm not going to toast that. That seems a little. So, what you can expect, couple little like minor details for the last cast. This show that you're listening to right now, our drop schedule, we're trying to keep to a within 24 hours of an episode. So, it'll drop around like 9 or 10 p.m. the following Monday is what we're aiming for. If we need a little wiggle room till like midnight Tuesday, please bear with us. But that's what you can expect from us. We have 9 weeks of this. We don't know if there's going to be any bonus shows or if we're going to bring some of the elements from our other show into this show insofar as like emails or comments, things like that. We'll get to that as it develops. But this is the first show. So thank you for being here and working out the kinks with us. Yeah, and lastly, our contact information. So if you would like to follow this podcast on the social medias, we're on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter, we're at TLOU Podcast. And on Instagram, we're at TLOU Podcasts, plural, because the other one was taken, unfortunately. And
damn you!
Yeah, I know. If you'd like to email us, you can do that by typing in tloupodcast@gmail.com. We love listener emails over on our other show, so I have no doubt we would absolutely love to have people writing in their thoughts about the HBO show as well. So if that's your thing, come and join us. Let's do this. The website, we have a website. You can go to tloupodcast.com. Check out
the
what
Last
we're doing
of Us
over there.
podcast, whatever one you want.
Yeah, it'll get you there. It'll get you there, and we'll be together. And that's why we're doing this, because we love just creating a bigger community around The Last of Us and our love and passion for it. And beyond that, Yeah, other contact information. You can find me on everything at Jaded Vader, and you can find Andrew at everything as Dark Driving.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just going to talk about some show information just real quick. The summary of The Last of Us, as written on the HBO website, is Joel and Ellie, a pair of connected survivors through the harshness of the world they live in, are forced to endure brutal circumstances and ruthless killers on a trek across a post-outbreak America. So that's the kind of overarching summary.
Yeah.
This episode summary, which is titled When You're Lost in the Darkness. 20 years after a fungal outbreak ravages the planet, survivors Joel and Tess are tasked with a mission that could change everything.
Change everything.
Everything.
Every goddamn thing.
And then some, really, truly. So that's where we're at with what the copy, the official copy for The Last of Us. But for now, Andrew, can you give us kind of like a high level summary of what happened in episode 1 before we really do our thing and break it down?
I'm ready. Here goes. Our story starts on a 1968 talk show discussing how the most dangerous kind of infection wouldn't be a parasite or a virus, but fungal. I just want to note, as we go through these, it's interesting to note HBO grabbing people to reuse, as they often do.
Yeah.
The host of this show is an actor named Josh Brenner, who played Big Head on Silicon Valley. So just kind of a neat thing to see him in a different role, kind of smarmy, which he was to a degree, but also a little bit of an idiot on Silicon Valley. It's worth noting. In this discussion, it provided parameters for how this fungal infection might happen, and chief among them seemed to be global warming. But most importantly, it described what would happen to a human being if infected by it, which is great. It's kind of given us the stakes here. Cut to 2003, our story goes from good to bad to worse. We meet Sarah, Joel, and Tommy and watch their lives descend from ordinary to fraught with peril. An outbreak turns their hometown of Austin, Texas into chaos, and in their mad scramble to escape, Sarah is killed, but not by who or what you'd expect. We move to 20 years later and change locations to Boston, behind the walls of a heavily fortified and military-run zone. Joel has a double life as both a laborer and a smuggler, but is planning to leave because he believes his brother Tommy is in danger. We meet his partner and boss, Tess, and they team up to try to locate their means of escape. In the process, they're met by Ellie and Marlene. Marlene, right? I'm saying that right. Sometimes I get that wrong, listeners. I apologize. Marlene. Yeah. The latter being the head of a resistance group called the Fireflies. Marlene offers Joel and Tess the means to find Tommy in exchange for delivering Ellie to a group of Fireflies at a government building in the heart of downtown Boston, far outside the safety of the walls. Joel reluctantly agrees, and they make their way out that night while Depeche Mode plays the episode out.
Oh, so sweet. Which, a perfect summary. Good job.
Thank you. I wrote that myself, everyone.
Yeah, he did. Just a little side note. If we like throw zingers like that back and forth for our new listeners, for Wayfaring Strangers, I write everything from start to finish. And this first go, Andrew's like, I'm going to write that. I'm going to write
it.
Me.
Let me fly. I'm a peacock. You got to let me fly on this one.
Yes.
A little. Peacocks don't fly, for the reference.
Yeah. That was a movie quote, and I can't remember the movie. I don't think I've seen it, but.
The other guys.
Yeah, there you go. So before we dive in, general reactions and thoughts on episode 1. So how did it make us feel? What was our gut or initial reaction basically from minute 1? And any kind of additional opinions, pretty much going to just be lumped into this general section. So how did it make you feel?
Nervous. Scared, crestfallen.
That word. You and that word.
Sullen, dejected.
Yes.
Etc.
Yeah.
At first, I always go into these things cautiously optimistic. When the how do you put this delicately? When the frame of reference for like a great video game adaptation is Sonic the Hedgehog, the bar is pretty low. Right? We're like, they did it with Sonic. It's like, okay,
yeah.
I guess. So I always calibrate expectations based on the data that you have at hand. That said, this is an incredibly strong first go at an adaptation of a thing that I love deeply.
Yes.
Not as much as my co-host, but I certainly love it deeply. And what they were able to do in terms of a condensation of the story paired with intelligently filling in gaps that we had otherwise was masterful. This episode was written by both Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. So Neil Druckmann wrote the game, and Craig, obviously, of Chernobyl and just a ton of great other properties under his belt, were so great about combining the things that we needed to know, pushing aside the things that weren't quite as important, but moving this story along in such a way that was just like fantastic.
Yeah.
And when I was supposed to be scared for these characters, I was. Knowing what was coming, right? Still, I was like, oh my God, this is intense.
This is intense, yeah.
And then laughing a little bit when we meet certain characters. I was just being delighted by how people embody these roles. I'm blown away, as I think everyone else is.
Yeah.
Even if your expectations were high, I assume they were exceeded when you watch this. Yeah. What about you? What do you think?
I'm with you. I'm this is an incredibly important franchise to my life. And I'm a grown-ass woman, and to think of not having The Last of Us in my life, it makes me feel like everything would just be dull and gray, and just not having that like fulfilled feeling of something that I'm so closely intertwined with now. I mean, my best friends, you and I, we just, side note, people, we are a couple in real life, and we have been for a very long time. And this project as a whole is something new for us to share, so it has enriched our relationship in its own way. And I am a very emotional person, and I gravitate towards heavy, emotional, hard-hitting stories. And I'm not saying I have never experienced that until The Last of Us. I certainly have, but I think that this just means more to me than anything has prior to this, and it has for years and years now. Clearly, like, spoiler.
You should tell people what. Oh yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything. I do have.
Yeah.
I have.
If you know, you know.
Yeah,
how about that?
If you know what I just did. Otherwise, don't go looking. But
that's the video version for anybody. There was a for listeners. She gestured to a tattoo on her forearm.
Yes.
Video viewers, take a peek.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a Last of Us sleeve in progress right now for my entire right arm, and it just, I had to have it as a part of me, almost like it's in my DNA. I need to see it on me every day. So that's the level of like love we're dealing with when it comes to this. So my expectations were, to say hi, that doesn't even cover it. They were just beyond the atmosphere, essentially. And I was very nervous. I've been nervous about this for years since it was announced. I was nervous when they announced the casting, and then when they started filming in July of 2021, and when they finished in June of 2022, and just all of these announcements one after the other, and directors and writers and locations and behind the scenes, everything was just, I was like, this feels too good to be true, and that scares me. And I was so relieved after watching the episode last night that you remember, I was sitting next to you on the couch, and I just put my hands on my face and cried, because I could not believe that it happened. Like,
the son of a bitch did.
Yes, I went to Twitter and I wrote a very expletive heavy text or tweet. And then I followed it up shortly thereafter. I was like, Craig Mazin understood the assignment. And
He did.
And I never doubted that for a second. Truly, Craig, I doubt you'll ever listen or watch this, but if you do, I never doubted it for a second. It was just when you love something so wholeheartedly, literally with your whole heart, how do you see it in a different way with different faces and different writers and different creators? And it's that's all. It was just that weird dissonance, but all put to bed as soon as it opened up with 1968 and talking about the possibility of a world-ending plague. Essentially, I was in. I looked at you and I was like, they did this. That is on the screen right now. And
Yeah.
blown away. I'm with you. I just kept using the mind blown emoji. TLDR, mind blown emoji.
Right. We could just pop it on the
Yeah.
screen right now. Over your face,
Yes, please.
mind
There
blown
you go.
emoji. Done. Yeah, I think that's pretty smart. I don't have I'm critical when I feel like I need to be.
Yes.
Right? I see no major parts of this to be critical about yet.
Yeah, exactly.
The work of a pilot has a lot riding on it. We have to meet people, we have to connect with them quickly.
Yeah.
The amount of time the literal amount of time that is covered in the pilot starts in 1968 and goes to 2023.
Yeah.
Right? That is like, and again, we use some tricks. We use the 20 years later and all that stuff, but to have such a dense amount of information delivered in a way that doesn't feel ham-fisted or boring, really. I thought the framing device of a talk show talking about science and principles and stuff like that, flexed probably some of the muscles that Craig used for Chernobyl.
Yes.
It's got that same vibe to it, right?
100%.
But also was an incredibly smart way to plant these seeds, pun intended, much earlier in time, and to show, for instance, again, I mentioned it in my summary, but like, it's trying to disprove all these people that would have these objections to it, right? Where like the guy who was playing opposite of the dude with the theory, who kept trying to debunk everything.
Yes.
That could be critical show watchers. That guy is critical show watchers. Like, fungus would never do this. It wouldn't survive in a body, right? And then the guy's just like, okay.
But
however, and so in a sense, it does the thing of like a great show, a great movie, a great piece of visual medium. The cardinal rule is show, don't tell, right? This told, but it told it in an interesting way, so I wasn't mad about it. You know what I'm saying? I love how much thought went into it. They seem to be very carefully considering all the avenues, and we'll discuss a lot more of those very shortly. But so good.
And I just as an aside, so this is of course our unofficial podcast, and there are a lot of other podcasts that are popping up. However, there is the official companion podcast to The Last of Us on HBO, which is hosted by Tori Baker, who is the original voice actor and performance capture artist for Joel Miller in The Last of Us Part 1, Left Behind, and The Last of Us Part 2. He is just fantastic. And I was very excited when we found out he was hosting, and he was joined this week, and I'm assuming every week going forward, with Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. It was like a 43, 44 minute conversation. I was able to listen to it today, and it was really good. I especially love listening to Craig Mazin because he has this knack for speaking from a passionate point of view with that industry knowledge of how to bring things to life that are believable in ways that might have otherwise failed in video game adaptations of past of yonder. And one of the things that you just talked about specifically with this 1968 scientist v host thing, And Craig mentioned that. He's like, we wanted it to be this kind of this thing simmering for a very long time. Like, it was brought to the light in 1968 in a public forum, in a public way.
Mhm.
And then, we just kind of get comfortable, we forget about it, we get complacent, and then boom, it happens, X amount of 35 years later. And the idea of that, and now I'm going kind of just of how I felt while he was talking about that on the podcast. It's so menacing and dark. And one, I eat that shit up. And two, it's so intelligent for a TV series adaptation to have something like that. Because when you're dealing with video games, you're so immersed because you are controlling the character. That I'm not saying a scene like that in the Last of Us video game would have fallen on deaf ears or wouldn't have hit appropriately. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm just saying we are thrust into this game, and first we're Sarah Miller, and we kind of navigate the world that way, and we see how that happens, and then you go from there. But it was so menacing, and I'm like, oh, that's just the thought of that, because that's what happens. We get complacent and we get comfortable and we forget, and then we get fucking smacked, and we're like, oh, I forgot, so
Right. Ooh. If only we had listened.
35 years ago. Am I doing the math there right?
Yeah.
68 to 03? It's 35. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nailed it.
there's so much to talk about, and I'm going to sprinkle little bits in of the official podcast where it's relevant for us, but I also encourage everyone to listen to that because it's wonderful. So
Sure.
But let's get into the breakdown of the show. So it is 1968. And this is how the show opens. So we have scientists discussing viral outbreaks and defining pandemics, which is eerie considering a flu-like virus named COVID-19 came to fruition, given the first speaker's fears. And that's pretty much what he feared the most. Came true. Whether he lived to experience that or not, who knows? But the epidemiologist talking about a fungal plague starts to go into a little bit more depth and his fear with that. And cordyceps is discussed along with aspergillus and other fungi examples. And we kind of have this back and forth of it's real, but it's not real for humans. And then that's countered with unless the planet heats up. So then we have global warming coming in, and this lends a whole new layer to the discussion and where we are at in 2023 and have been for quite a while dealing with this. Just the idea of puppets with poisoned minds because of certain strains of fungus, including cordyceps, which is the big hitter in the Last of Us series. And I have to say, as an aside, when this scientist in this TV show cold opening started talking, there is no treatment for this, it is not possible to make them, I just have had that was the most beautiful vindication I've ever felt in my entire life, Andrew. Ever. I've been saying that over on Wayfaring Strangers. I've been tweeting that for years, and people have pushed back at me every single chance they've gotten.
Okay.
So, basically, one more sentence, and then we can dive into this.
Sure.
It goes from we always win, whether it's war, famine, just the
other
threat
plagues
of nuclear war or other plagues or other viruses. We always win in the end. But basically, if cordyceps happens, we lose. And that's a really sobering, sad place to leave that conversation.
Yeah, and then they toss it to commercial. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
We're going to let you sit with that one for a little bit.
Yeah, the audience is just kind of like, blink, blink. What do we do with this information?
Two things I want to note here, okay? We'll get to we'll get to you in a moment. Just hold your horses. We'll get to that. They did a really incredible thing here from a perspective and acting all around. When he is describing how this fungus would take hold of a person and essentially turn them into a puppet, we had these shots of the audience in attendance of this talk show, basically sitting blank-faced, not moving, right? Yeah. And it was such a powerful visual that was paired with the words, but also it could be applied to literally like kind of anything. Like even the media we watch turns us into like puppets. Like what we consume consumes us, that kind of thing. I loved that. There were only maybe two shots back to back of like this set of people looking, and there was just like complete no movement whatsoever. And it was like beautifully lit. It was like really, really nicely done.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
A foreshadowing also, for sure.
Of course. This thing about the no treatments. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. We've heard this before.
In real life.
Right. And yet we find a way. Okay. That's all I'll say.
But do we?
Hope finds a way, right? Life finds a way. It is interesting to put your foot down right in the beginning to say, what will happen to you? There is no recourse for.
Yeah.
It's very much a like, go on, test me, see what happens, right? From like a show making point of view. And I really thought that was kind of lovely. They didn't refute it. They didn't try to refute it at all. Like even the other scientist who's well aware of what, he's dubious about whether or not this could take place, but all of the symptoms that our one scientist described about what would happen, he did not refute any of those. He was like, yeah, that's about right.
That's exactly what would happen too. I mean, full stop. That's what would happen. And there's been kind of murmurings in the news that this could actually happen. Not necessarily cordyceps, not necessarily this, puppeteering effect that happens, which is real. Again, on the companion podcast, Craig talked about the Nat Geo documentary, and I can't remember if it was the big series that they did a while back that I absolutely love, and I cannot remember the name of it. The
Planet Earth?
Planet Earth, yes. It was on Planet Earth. There's like a 5-minute clip, and you can look it up on YouTube, but I also strongly encourage a watch of Planet Earth because it's just stunning. But of cordyceps and how its process works, and we're going to kind of talk about that throughout this entire series, but certainly this episode. So but me as an aside, if y'all know me, if you've been listening to me for a while, I almost just broke out into like vindicated, just full stop. Because
you were the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where you're just pointing at the...
just like, I knew I said it, But there was no camera on us last night. But
that's fine.
Yes. So moving forward from there, I'm going to take the next section, and then you can have it for a little while, Andrew. But after this cold opening, roll credits, and we, there's, I mean, where do you even start? Like after we discuss a fungal outbreak, putting the roll credits in this sequence, this title sequence in there, which was done by the same artist who created Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, His Dark Materials, and the name escapes me. I apologize. I've seen so many tweets about how they're all done by the same person, but nobody lists the name, and I'm like information overload right now, so I apologize.
It's a big. I'm certain it's
not
a
one
big
person.
Production house. Yeah, it's a huge production house. But we're familiar with it. If we were to go to artofthetitle.com, it would certainly be listed there.
Absolutely, yeah. But this placement for the credit sequence was the most logical. I will say that first and foremost. We're talking about one thing, and then bam, we see just this this very yellow, sickly fungus taking over the world, starting with the United States, and then we morph into a skeleton, and
a skeleton.
And then we see just the planet laying to waste, and Joel and Ellie silhouettes as spores. And it was just stunning. It was beautiful. The music keeping true to the original soundtrack score by Gustavo Santaolalla. It was stunning. I loved it. I will say I think my only talking point here is the placement of the credits. However, I want to save that for when we talk about Sarah specifically.
Okay.
So, 10 out of 10 for the title sequence. It was beautiful. It was stunning. The music, it made me cry. We were into it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely a top 5 contender for best title sequences of all time.
For sure.
It's an art unto itself to be able to make these things. And clearly this studio that HBO works with to make these things for Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and this. We're talking other ones that are high up on the list. Also, HBO shows like Westworld has an incredible title sequence. Think about other prestige dramas. We have stuff like Dexter.
Yeah.
And the best title sequences are the ones that convey a theme or a message of the show within the title sequence itself. Netflix, well, it's now on Disney Plus, but whatever. Daredevil is another one of my all-time favorite title sequences. It's just this kind of red. We're meant to believe it's blood, but it's just oozing down over the character of Daredevil, the city of New York, all this stuff. Yeah. It's stunning, really.
Which reminds me of Hannibal, now that you're talking about that, which was also a beautiful intro.
Oh yeah, Hannibal, of course.
Like the actual like human forms of the characters being made out of blood.
Yeah. I think that if a show really takes the time to do a title sequence, it usually is very effective.
Yes, it is.
And this is no exception. Whether we are talking about something CG, like what we're looking at right here, or something a little bit more in the realm of straight filming like Dexter. Dexter is great because it just showcases like everyday brutality, but in a throwaway kind of manner. Yeah. And you're like, oh, you get what the show is about if you just watch the title sequence. And I think that is true here too. So yeah, well done. Well done. Right after the title sequence, we cut to 2003. So what do we get to see in this sequence? We see a photo of Sarah and Joel on a corkboard. We get to experience their nice little slice of heaven, this like very domestic bliss that they live in as father-daughter. This makes what inevitably happens hit a lot harder. We didn't necessarily get this portion of it in the video game side, what their actual day-to-day life was like, right? Yeah. So Avril Lavigne is playing. It really transports you to a time and place in our culture. She's really cooking breakfast for her dad. Lots of real life stuff here. Not TV real life, like real life stuff, right?
Yeah.
It is Joel's 36th birthday this day. Okay. Mm-hmm. So for the rest of the story, it's, 20 years later, he's 56. He's a 56-year-old man, right? For whatever that's worth, he's 56 years old. Okay. Mm-hmm. We get Joel and his signature coffee. It's a kind of a staple of his character in the games. Joel love coffee. That is a statement you could say. Joel love coffee. We get introduced to brother Tommy, Joel's brother Tommy. There is a brief conversation about a place that Joel and Tommy aren't too familiar with called Jakarta.
Yeah, like, is that a country?
It was just a lovely little exchange, a little throwaway thing. It talks about we talk about some tainted food, right, as a possibility. A really interesting thing that comes over from the video game is Halligan drops the shirt that Sarah is wearing. It's identical to the one that is in the game. Just nice little touches there. Yeah. It's very apparent that she is taking care of him. It's not the other way around. She is the one who, he woke up late that morning. She's cooking breakfast. Like, she is running the show in this house, right? Yeah. She reaches in his top drawer, removes a watch and like a wad of cash. Mm-hmm. We don't know exactly what's happening at this point, but you're like, whoa, what the hell, Sarah? You seem like a cool person up until now. All right. We see an engraved knife that she also removes from the drawer. She clicks it open. We have some horses on there. Pretty interesting to note. Just, we have this knife. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is we move outside. We hear a horn honk. Sarah snaps out of it, puts all the stuff back in the drawer, except the watch and the money. We run outside. We have a very funny neighbor convo about coming over for biscuits. Joel says he's on Atkins. No, thank you. Yeah. Again, extremely 2003, right? On the way to school and work, we get a couple little glimpses into Tommy's character. He's a smoker, and he is a veteran. Operation Desert Storm, to be specific.
And just a little quick aside. I'm going to talk about this. I watched a lot of the interviews that I could find from the LA premiere, the LA black carpet premiere of The Last of Us. Carpet. Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy Miller in the show, he was interviewed, and something he said like tripped the curiosity bells in my brain, because he was talking about how Tommy puts all of this violence behind him, and then all of a sudden the outbreak happens and all of this violence comes back to his life. And I remember I sent it to one of my best friends, and I was like, what is the violence that Tommy is talking about here? What exactly, what part of his past, do we not know? Or was that a slip up? Or did he mean, all the violence post outbreak? Now we know that he's a combat veteran from Operation Desert Storm, and given the timeline and how it was moved from the game was set in 2013. The show moves it up to 2003.
Yeah.
So now we know where certain elements will come into play with this really quick thing that is missable in the way of a bumper sticker.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, and that's just like smart. Like, we're going to throw that in there because this detail, which we linger on just enough for you to see what's there, helps to inform some of the things that Tommy is able to do later.
Yeah.
Right? It's great. It's a great little touch.
Yeah.
That is show, don't tell. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. So, Sarah is in school. Very, very funny shot. George W. Bush is the president, right up on a public school wall, of course, right next to the flag. We see a student twitching beside Sarah, but it's through the gold, like a golden bracelet or golden watch, kind of some light dancing on her face, which was interesting.
Yeah.
She then takes a city bus to a watch repair shop. The cat clock on the wall is a nice touch. I think everyone maybe had that cat clock. Sarah has the watch repaired. $20. Not bad. It was a spring. Classic spring problem.
Joel.
While this is happening, we see some cops and military rolling by. It's like 2 police cars, a fire truck, SWAT van, stuff like that go by in the background, right? There's like a little bit of urgency. Something's going on. Sarah gets rushed out of the store. She's like, take the watch, take the thing, please leave, go home.
Yeah.
Be safe, be with your family, that sort of thing. Sarah goes to her neighbors after school. We meet Mercy the dog. 10 out of 10 dog. 11 out of 10 dog, truly.
Yeah.
We find out the neighbors are holy rollers.
Yes.
Was it 3 holes plus 1 cross equals 4 given,
yeah,
I believe?
I think that was the line. Yeah.
Oof.
That was the line. It's intense.
Sarah we're going to make some cookies. Oh, incredible. Chocolate chip, raisin. Just a complete deflation like all of us might feel.
Yeah.
While the cookies are being made, Sarah runs out she's looking at some DVDs that are on a shelf, right? We don't know why, but she's just perusing this kind of list of DVDs. Mm-hmm. And we see a previously kind of wheelchair-bound, semi-catatonic grandmother over her shoulder, blurry, right? Mm-hmm. Depth of field and stuff like that. We've seen this character earlier, begins twitching and writhing, and her mouth opens like incredibly wide. It's very disturbing. It's even though we don't see the details, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I want to say I feel proud I called this.
Yes, you did.
This is a trope. I was like, what's the scariest possible thing that could happen if that woman starts running around after you?
If Gam loses it, we all gone.
And then I was like, yes. Oh my God, we're about to see some crazy shit with Gam. Mercy knew, dogs always being the first to know, knew something wasn't right. Looks just like whimpering and looking at Gam. Not great. Not good. We see military jets. We hear military jets and see them fly overhead, which is Now we're starting to see like something's very serious.
Yeah.
Something's very wrong here. Joel, who said he was going to get home at 9, gets home at 10. He worked a double on his birthday. He forgot his own cake.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch. Sarah is upset. But she gives him his watch gift anyway. Very funny little exchange. He puts it up to his ear. It's okay, I gotcha, right? It was a lovely moment.
Yeah.
These are the little things they're able to seed where we fall in love with Sarah, right?
Yeah.
We find out that the DVD is a thing called Curtis and Viper 2.
Which is an Easter egg from The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, it's an Easter egg. It's wonderful. Yeah. It's wonderful. They sit down to watch that. Sarah says she will not fall asleep. It is far too riveting. Cut to Sarah asleep. Yeah. Joel gets a call. It's Tommy. He says he's in jail. Yeah. Some guy at the bar was acting a fool. Tommy knocked his ass out. But it wasn't his fault. But he can't be there over the weekend. He needs to get bailed out. It's serious business. Joel goes to help his brother, of course. Duty calls. Yeah. He puts Sarah to bed.
Well, in Talking Point. I mean, and that's one of the entire story would have fallen apart if Joel did not go and get his brother out of jail. Because if Tommy had to stay in there over the weekend, he would have been infected or he would have been attacked and he would have been killed. And then Sarah would have ended up dead. That's what we have to assume. And so would Joel. Like, it just, all of it would have fallen apart from that moment. And it's just so, when you really think about the gravity of that and how unassuming it should be, like, you know, Tommy kind of has a little bit of that bad boy vibe going on. And then we get this call and it's like, you know, we know Joel's going to do right by his brother. But if we think of an alternate universe where he doesn't, the whole story falls apart.
Yeah. Absolutely. It would be the first domino to fall in a series of dominoes. True. So Joel leaves to go. He first puts Sarah to bed. He covers her with a blanket.
Vindication Part 2 for me.
Right. And then Joel is off to go bail his brother out of jail, which sounds like he was in the downtown
Travis
jail.
County.
So, Joel would be going presumably into a city center, which we are about to see very shortly what those look like.
Yeah, which makes sense, you know, jumping ahead a little bit in the episode when they get back to the house, just like in a fury, like just hauling ass down that street because, you know, God knows what they had seen by that point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's don't tell or show, don't tell. Like,
exactly.
But just like two little minor talking points for me. I know I made the joke about the Vindication Part 2, and that's it for the Vindication talk for this episode, I promise. But when we covered the first episode over on Wayfaring Strangers of the prologue, I was like, why didn't Joel cover his daughter with a blanket? Like, it doesn't... I mean, we're parents. We have a 13-year-old daughter. And, I mean, if I put her to bed, I would cover her. Like, it was one of those weird video game ass shit things, which is a running joke over on Wayfaring, video game ass shit. So if you hear that here, it's like improbable, implausible, unbelievable things that can only happen in a video game sense.
Sure. You don't cover your daughter in a video game because you would have to animate covering your daughter in a video. And it's like, let's just lay her on top and walk away. Super easy.
And then the second thing is I was a little sad there was no baby girl comment. There is eventually.
Yes. Eventually,
but
yes.
In
correct.
that scene there was not. So that was a little different. So then we're going to move on from Sarah Miller's life to unfortunately Sarah Miller's death. So the world outside is going to absolute shit and it is happening very quickly. What is that expression? The world, hell in a handbasket. Hell in a handbasket.
Hell in a hand.
Right?
Yes.
Hell, yeah. The world outside is hell in a handbasket. So, and I feel like Mrs. Adler, the neighbor, would appreciate that expression. But anyway, Joel is not in the house. The living room is so similar to Joel in the game. And again, we're going to try and talk about the game here and there, but we really want to make this as much of a standalone as we can for people who are just perhaps not as interested while still honoring the game franchise because, you know, first and foremost, that's the OG. So we get we get a jump scare. We get our first jump scare with Mercy the dog just right on the window. And I fully admit that I bopped a little in my seat. Um,
You
I
did.
did. And chaos outside. It's just chaos outside. It's a frightening moment. We have like power lines just blowing up and, large military helicopters and just it's bad. It's bad. But as Sarah approaches the Adlers, which is the last name of their neighbors, as she approaches the
Hmm.
house, she's very hesitant, and then she opens the door, and we see that the rug, like the hallway run, what are they called? Runners?
The
Yeah,
runner,
the
yeah.
runner rug is rolled up. So it indicates some sort of struggle, whether somebody tried to get in. Somebody was moving fast in that hallway. And Nico Parker, who plays Sarah Miller, she did a fantastic job in the time that she was allotted. But I think for that moment specifically, you and I both know if we are presented with this situation, walking into someone's house and seeing things on the
Yeah.
floor and then a rug bundled up, that would
Hmm.
be like immediately the alarm
Nope.
bells would go.
Yeah.
And in this particular sequence, so we've been talking about Craig Mazin too, and his just Chernobyl, which is a perfect mini series. If you haven't seen it, please go and watch that. The music in this sequence, I don't know if you picked this up, Andrew, really has echoes of Chernobyl in like
I,
specifically in this moment. Hmm.
yeah. I could certainly hear that. I wouldn't be shocked if we have our theme song by Gustavo and many of the interstitials and stuff like that. But I wouldn't be shocked if Craig was like, I like this
Yeah,
also, right? And we somehow were able to work those two things
yeah.
together. Yeah.
And I mean, and there's a lot of similarities between what happens in Chernobyl and what happens in The Last of Us on a much different um like
Yeah.
provenance. It's a much different provenance, but
Sure.
it's end times for many, many people. So, but yeah, so as we're in the kitchen, we see infected old Gam Gam. She's feeding off of humans. So this is interesting. And this is our first introduction to tendrils. So the
Yeah.
infected, yeah, I mean, that was disturbing. That was full stop disturbing. It was scarier than honestly I expected it to be because we've become so used to game infected that adding this additional
Yes.
layer of basically mycelium coming out of an infected person's mouth and feeding off of non-infected is horrifying.
Right.
Straight
Yeah.
up horrifying. But there's this instinctual directive with infected persons now, and we're going to come back to this, but they move in the direction of non-infected. So they're always being driven by their head, their brain. And that's a very important thing because it's part of that
Yeah.
virus effect and affect essentially. And once we're
Hmm.
outside, Sarah hauls ass and Gam Gam does not get that girl, thankfully. And it becomes Grandma becomes Joel's first kill. And Sarah witnesses this, and you can see that it scares the hell out of her. She cries immediately, and it's just a sad situation. And I feel bad for the Adlers.
Yep.
But we move on to the car sequence, which mirrors almost exactly in certain areas what happened in The Last of Us Part 1. And it's gold. It's
Hmm.
wonderful. But the dialogue's a little different. Sarah has concern about terrorists, and this is absolutely in line with the collective American thought process in 2003, given the events that happened on
Hmm.
9/11 September in
Yep.
2001. So that element brought to the story enriched it in ways I was like, oh no, that takes me back. Like that's taking me back. And I remember
Hmm.
that, like, if one thing happened, we're like, so it's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah.
And we see the farm on fire, similar dialogue with slight changes to the game. And Sarah is trying to link the origin of the Adler's sickness and other people with hospital visits and the frequency of said hospital visits. And I think that that's what all of us would do in this instance. Just try to figure out where this started, try to make sense of this, try to see where we are at. Are we sick? What does this mean? We know nothing about this.
Yeah. And you could tell she's a little nervous because she had just been in the city.
Yes.
They were like, it's probably just the folks in
Yeah.
the city. And she was like, I was literally on a city bus
Mhm.
in the city earlier
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
you know?
But there's there's tells to how this infection works and spreads throughout this episode, and we'll get to that as we get to that. But Tommy and, for me, Gabriel Luna's acting in this sequence is a standout. I mean, he almost sounds exactly like Jeffrey Pierce, and Jeffrey Pierce is the voice and performance artist for The Last of Us Part 1 and 2. It was almost like if I closed my eyes, I was like, "Ooh, that's Jeffrey." And that's wonderful. So, and speaking aside, if anybody is interested in hearing Jeffrey Pierce and his thoughts, we were fortunate enough to interview him over on Wayfaring Strangers, so head on over and check that episode out. So Joel is trying to make this work, but the fear on Tommy's face says it all. Joel is trying to be the parent in this situation. He's trying to calm things down. I think Tommy knew that it was all going to go to shit. And Sarah is saying basically what Tommy is thinking in this plane, in this truck. As this is happening, the airplanes are falling from the sky, and it's very cinematic, and it would likely happen for sure. We have this suspenseful music going, but ultimately an airplane crashing on the road behind them is what causes their truck to crash and kind of sends them out on foot and the ensuing scenes. But that was extremely TV ass show shit. And I love it. But,
Yeah. Well, as some piece of debris from the plane went
right through the cab.
Through the window and flipped the car over. I was like, okay. Or whatever the impact, however the car goes off the road and flips over. I was like, wow, well done.
It was intense, and it wasn't, it's like we talk about every once in a while Chekhov's gun and how things, if you see something, it has to have a payoff at some point. If they're focusing on something, it has to have some sort of rewarding scene. And I know that this was fast, and I don't necessarily consider it that, but, just the planes flying overhead, and then the sequence of them driving forward, and then this rush of people, and now they have to go backwards towards where the planes were. And I was like, well, I mean, we've seen the trailer, we know a plane's going to crash, but I didn't think that was going to cause their inevitable crash and get them out on the road.
Yeah. A to B. Exactly. Yeah.
So, in this, Sarah's ankle is broken, and Tommy and Joel and Sarah get separated. So Joel and Sarah are together. Tommy's on the other side because a police car smashes into their upturned truck, separating them. Joel and Sarah are in an alleyway. So they make plans. Just go towards the water. We'll meet up shortly. Joel is holding Sarah, and he walks out through the alleyway and comes upon basically an entire street of infected feeding off of the dead. And a runner, presumably they're called runners in the video games. I don't know if that's going to carry on to the show. They haven't called them anything yet. We're not there yet. It's not a spoiler, I promise. But we see this in they run. And you see that in the
That's
show.
all they do.
But the infected spots Joel and Sarah and just torpedoes himself chasing after the Millers. And we heard what the scientist said in the intro of this show, talking about how the fungus infects the brain and puppets people, essentially, and prevents the body from decaying. So we have this infected man just becoming a battering ram, chasing after Joel and Sarah, not even understanding what's happening or having any spatial awareness. Just, I have to follow because of pheromones or whatever. And it's such a sickening scene at its core to just think like they're basically being led around by a string wrapped in their head. So
it was interesting to see how little coordination they had. It didn't seem like a ton of what would you call that? Like, didn't have a lot of movement with their arms. It was like almost running with their arms by their, like letting them flail behind them almost, and then first. Just like this way, that way, this way, right? It was kind of it was a little. I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting take, because the runners that we would be used to in the game had. They grab, they do things, and more they will go around things. These guys are just like straight line, turn, straight line, turn. It's like, oh, that's scary.
It's horrifying, and they're fast. They are fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And even what we saw, what happened with the grandmom, or I'm calling her Gam Gam. Well, she's Gam Gam. Even what we saw with Gam, she
Yeah.
basically, this virus, this fungal infection, whatever was wrong with her that had her in a catatonic state, that had her
Hmm.
um just in every sense of the word appearing disabled, was switched off.
Yeah.
It
It
it quote
fixed,
unquote,
not
yeah,
fixed, but
just
it.
reversed that, but then
Hmm.
turned her into this mindless killing machine thing. So
Yeah.
it's I really like what they're doing with that. Full stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then, we move along a little bit, and Joel and Sarah are stopped by a soldier who is radioing to likely the officer in charge, their officer in charge. And
Hmm.
so, quick side note, the soldier that's responsible for shooting and thus killing Sarah in the scene, I said to Andrew last night, I was like, his voice kind of sounds like Craig Mason, just a little bit. But I Googled, and it was an
Just
actor
a
named
bit.
Ryan D. Clark, credited as soldier. So
Hmm.
wasn't Craig, but I just had to do a little digging. But we have the similar, you know, assault rifle goes off, turn, fall, shot, and then the realization Tommy kills the soldier. Joel was grazed by a bullet on his left side, and then Sarah's death ensues. And certain things were very similar to the game. Sarah's hand placements on, the upper part of his shirt,
Hmm.
on his bicep, and Joel looking back for his brother, and screaming for him, was just in this guttural sense, broke my heart all over again. I cried all over again. I'm getting a little choked up again, because then he starts begging for his baby girl not to go, and it's like, damn, I have seen this so many times, and yet it still
Yeah.
hits so hard every time. And seeing these
Hmm.
two people experience that again after witnessing that happy home life, their happiness and what they made with it, mm, it's not easy.
Yeah. I think it's remarkable
Yeah.
that it hurt,
Mhm.
knowing that it was coming. Any video game player knew that that is how this part ends. It is I think at the end of the episode, Craig described it
Yeah.
as the fulcrum point for Joel. That exact moment is the fulcrum point for Joel. And if you look at the timestamp at this time of the episode, we're roughly 33 minutes in. So in 33 minutes, we fell in love with Sarah, and then she was taken away. And it hurt like hell. And that speaks to Nico Parker
Amazing.
doing just like God tier acting in this show. It was hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. I think another thing that Craig said was like, it was not a beautiful death. It was a very visceral, like, I was like, that's how it would happen. I make fun of it all the time in movies and television shows. Like, if you're shot, you're not going to give like a soliloquy and be like, and don't forget to tell my wife. Like, you can't do do shit, right? Like, and that's what this was. All she could do was like shake her head no and cry, right? And you're like, I was like, it's hard to watch. It's like incredibly hard to watch. And so like, kudos. It was. I said it last. I was like, I knew it was coming, and it still hurt like
really
hell.
hurts. I think so. To go back to one thing that we talked about real quick with the title sequence and talking about the placement of the credits. So on the TV show, the credit sequence rolled after the scientists are discussing a potential fungal outbreak and what it could spell for humanity. And while
Yes.
that resonated and certainly worked and didn't necessarily detract from the overall impact of this episode, I just want to let non-gamer folk know that in the game The Last of Us Part 1, the title sequence and credit sequence, whatever you want to call it, rolls after Sarah's death. So we get to experience this 15 to 20 minutes of prologue. It's hard-hitting, it's intense. Sarah dies. pretty much Joel is broken in and shattered into pieces, and then everything fades to black. The title sequence rolls, and then it says 20 years later. And I do agree, some people have been saying
Yeah.
this, I do agree that it would have been more hard-hitting had that happened. However, being 30 some minutes into an episode and then rolling the credits would have thrown off the pacing of the show.
It's a bold thing to do. I've seen it.
Yeah.
In movies where you'll be
An hour in.
I'm thinking of the movie. I didn't love the movie, but if I'm not mistaken, the movie Mandy, the Nicolas Cage movie, I think the title sequence happens, like the title of the movie appears at like an hour into the 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
It's bananas. And I totally get your reasoning. Where you put the title sequence basically orients you as like, is this the prologue or is this the story now, right? And putting it where they did squarely puts the 1968 portion as the prologue. This was the lead-in to what happened here. I feel like they could have just as easily, this is a 90-minute episode, so 30 minutes in, how audacious is that to put the title sequence at the 33-ish minute mark and say like everything that happened before this is just the beginning. Now we get to the shit, right? I could see the argument either way. I mean, I liked it, but I also respect when they go for it. They're like 30 minutes in is when you get our title sequence and not a moment before, you know?
Yeah.
So that's great. 20 years later, we are now in Boston. How'd we get here?
Doesn't matter.
We don't know. We see a child emerge from the woods. We see this person walking. We're like, what's going on here? Duct tape shoes, all this stuff. Very distinctive sneakers, which we're experiencing. We're in the woods. There's a lot of walking. We're not really sure about this kid. He's not displaying symptoms, right? Or at least the symptoms that we had just witnessed of like madness, but something's a little off, right? He comes to a clearing. He sees what I had described, this kind of fortified walled area, and begins walking towards it, right? The child collapses just before getting to the gate, and a soldier sees this and beelines towards him. Door opens, kid's brought in, and he's strapped to a wheelchair, brought into this, it looks like just a repurposed home of some kind, and they do a little testy test on his neck here. It looks like maybe a needle and just one prick thing. And we see very clearly that this device flashes red, right? The person who is helping to administer the test, talking to this kid, trying to get his name, where he came from, if there's anybody else, is asking him a bunch of questions. This kid is kind of like looking at the wall. We see an infection poster. They have an infection poster with a body labeled. So it's head, neck, face, torso, arm, shoulder, hand, leg, and foot. And then times, which we assume are times to infection if you are bit in any of these places. They are in the head, neck area, 5 to 15 minutes. Torso, arm, shoulder, hand is 2 to 8 hours. And then foot and leg is 12 to 24 hours. So at best, you get hit in the leg, you get hit in the foot, you have a day, and you're donezo, right?
And the kid had a wound on his knee.
The soldier looks, she's like, where did you get this from? It's like right on his knee. And so this soldier, very kind, she's like, how would you like to have I think she offers some toys, some food, maybe a shower, something along those lines, like a bunch of things. She's like, we're just going to give you some medicine. And then as soon as you wake up, you'll have all these toys and stuff like that. What she injected him with, kills him ultimately, which we're going to find out. Yeah. We see a truck pull up to a burn pit, which you'd be familiar with, and a lot of zombie lore has burn pits. We burn the bodies so they don't continue to come back. It's a thing. Joel walks up to the back of this truck that pulls up, and opens the thing. There's a woman there who's also in charge of like putting bodies in the burn pile and all this stuff like that. And we see not the child's face, it's covered up, but we know it's him based on the hood and the sneakers. It's very sad. The woman says, I can't do it. I can't do it. Mm-hmm. Joel doesn't really even bat an eye. He just picks up the body of this child and throws it in the fire. We're like, whew, that is, there is nothing there, right?
I disagree a little bit, but we'll get to that.
Well, maybe it's more of a business as usual thing, but where she hesitated, he did not. He looked.
That's a great. He did not.
Yeah,
hesitate.
He looked.
You're right.
And there's a job that needs to be done, and he did it. Right. He then goes to sign up for more work. It's clear that there is a system in place here of workers sign up and get cards that they can use for things like rations and probably others. That is the currency, these ration cards, I guess. You see like shoelaces for sale, that sort of thing. We get an idea of QZ life. Joel signs up to clean some sewers. He's clearly not above anything. He's like, whatever pays more, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. There's a scene that we come across. Joel's making his way through the QZ, crowded streets, dirty, dingy, snipers on the roof, all this kind of stuff. We see 3 people that are about to be publicly executed, hung for crimes, going out into the quarantine zone, right? That sort of thing.
Or trying to
break in. Either way, right? Just skirting the law. The punishment is severe. Mm. This is where we meet Joel the smuggler. So he's a hard worker during the day and clearly a hard worker at night. Just he moonlights. He is selling a Fedra soldier, one of the soldiers tasked with keeping this place safe, drugs, oxy, painkillers. It's noted that Atlanta, Georgia is the place that makes 2 things, pills and bullets. And, there's some interesting language there, like the more people you shoot, the harder it is to sleep, that sort of thing. Yeah. Just a nice little detail about how scarce things are. Joel presents the drugs in a plastic bag, but says, I'll need that back. Like how quickly today we would just throw away a plastic bag, but like that's gold, right? Mm-hmm. So the soldier, pockets the stuff or whatever. And the deal that Joel is brokering with this soldier is like pills for this entire squad of guys, like 200 or, they were discussing the details, but essentially it's for a truck. It's like Joel's goal is to get a truck, we learn. Yeah. This soldier says, stay off the streets tonight. The fireflies are blowing shit up across the city. A lot of itchy trigger fingers. It's easy to make a mistake in the dark, I think is the line. And then we see some spray paint. We had seen some spray paint that looked like a firefly.
Well, yeah, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lots to process there, but I think more of it plays out as we continue through this episode, so we're just going to continue. But we're finally introduced to Tess here and Robert simultaneously, both characters in the video game. So Robert and Tess are having this interaction, and it does not appear to be going too well for Tess. She has a swollen eye, a busted lip. She's sitting in a chair surrounded by 2 dudes on either side of her. She's been in better situations for sure. And so Robert's actor is an actor named, and this is just a little side note for nerdy TV people. His name is Brendan Fletcher. So he guest starred on Supernatural, the CW Supernatural, way back in the first season in 2005, and his name was Max Miller. So I just wanted to, bring that to, little Miller connection there. But Tess selling Robert on Joel not beating his ass to a bloody pulp is one of my favorite things. Anna Torv is an absolute goddess. We have loved her for decades now, legitimately. And but the opposite end of that, Robert is such a bitch that it really, for me, I was like, how does this guy hold any form of leadership or any position where people follow and listen to him amongst smugglers and thieves and such, when he's so intimidated by Tess and then Joel, basically, the idea of Joel, just like scares this man.
Yeah.
So, Robert. But then there's a sudden explosion. It's clear it's a Firefly bombing. Again, we just had that reference from the Fedra soldier to Joel being like, there's just bombings happening around the city. There's attacks happening. Stay off the streets. And we see one happen basically in real time. But as Tess exits this blown out basement, now she could walk right out in the street, there is a blood trail leading away from the room that was just occupied by Robert, his men, and Tess.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly Robert has survived.
Yeah.
But he is slightly injured. But Tess tries to follow in his footsteps and ends up in a firefight between Fedra and the Fireflies. And what can she do? Nothing. So she basically throws her hands up and she surrenders to Fedra. And we find out later on that she was in lockup for most of the day.
Yeah.
And that is where this little sequence ends. And I'm going to take this next one because this is pretty small.
Sure.
But so we're still in the Boston QZ for basically this whole episode. We are until the very end. But we see Ellie. We have Ellie's introduction.
But is it Ellie?
But is it Ellie?
But is it?
No, it's someone named Veronica. And Veronica is chained up. But Veronica is very much Veronica. And this was such a different introduction to the character of Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it was so well done because of what Bella Ramsey brought to this role.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more of that as we get more of this character. But for now, it was just kind of a very quick interaction between Fireflies and a chained teenage girl.
Yes. Yeah. It was good.
Who does not know why she's there.
Yeah. But they're clearly doing some sort of test. Mm-hmm. They're doing cognitive tests. They say, hold out your arm, that sort of thing. So what's going on here? What are we trying to figure out about this girl? Right? Pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Back in the QZ with Joel, we have a line of folks writing messages. Essentially what they're doing is in line for a radio to send a message out to whoever they need to get in contact with. It's a massive line. And Joel's like, lines. What? Who gives a shit? 73KO. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's the radio tower that Joel is, what's he trying to do here? Is he trying to communicate with this radio tower? Is that my understanding?
So that was the call sign of the man that he ends up having a conversation with, because he says 73K Orlando.
Yeah.
I don't know who he was talking to prior to Joel sitting down, but it was a woman who was pregnant, mm-hmm. trying to reach someone through this ham radio system elsewhere.
Got it.
Clearly not in Boston.
Okay.
But Joel, just go.
Yeah, that's fine. That's a little vague, but there it is. Mm-hmm. Joel's basically here to see if his brother Tommy has responded to his message. We learn that Tommy never takes more than a day to respond, and it's been 3 weeks, right? So Joel's like a little like, what the hell, man, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever we're led to believe here, it's that Tommy and Joel remain close. Even though they might not be in the same area geographically, they stay in contact with each other. I think that's the important thing. Joel's got some kind of rapport with this radio operator that allows him to just go to the front of the line. He throws like half a pack of cigarettes at the guy, and the guy's like, haven't heard from him. It's like it's a very cool thing. Mm-hmm. Joel's like, I'm going. Like, I'm going to go find him then. The guy's like, don't go there. More than what we know, there are raiders and slavers. He's like, you wouldn't believe the shit I hear over the radio about what is out there. Don't go. Yeah. We learn that Tommy is in Wyoming, which is pretty far from Boston.
Yeah.
We then go to Joel's apartment. They have a beautiful shot of dust in the air, like through the sunlight. Is very reminiscent of the video games. If you played I feel like that shot is in there for people who played the video game, where they're like, look, this is for you. It's very, very cool. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of details about what life is like in this world. The bed is propped up on cinder blocks, right? Mm-hmm. Joel begins kind of spiraling. He moves this dresser, pulls out a bunch of gear from underneath some floorboards, ultimately pulling out a big map or like an atlas or something like that. He's charting a course to Wyoming, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, slamming back whiskey, popping pills, like he is not a happy dude, right? And then he eventually passes out. It's we see we catch a glimpse of his watch that we know from the prologue, and it's all messed up. And then he has some nightmares. It's a lot. It's a lot in a little bit of time, but very impactful.
Yes, it is a lot. And I think that's what we can say about pretty much every sequence of events. It's just packed.
Yeah.
This show is packed, but it's paced so well that it doesn't feel long or drawn out or too much going on or overwhelmed. And I think that that's, again, another testament to the creators and just everyone who brought this show to life.
Yeah.
But from here, so we're with Joel and Tess arrives home and just kind of taps him. He rolls over and she spoons him, and I felt this in my soul.
You got a little. You were like, wow. You thought some
know,
more.
like,
you thought something else was about to happen. You're like, I was.
I did. Listeners, I don't. Again, if you're new here, hello, hi. Joel is my end all be all. Video game Joel. I have to say that. I love Pedro. I love you too, Andrew. But but I was like, is there gonna be a little moment? A little moment, but ultimately there was not.
No,
but
Tess is like, I got the shit beat out of me today. I just want to take a nap.
Yeah, I understand. That. That's believable.
Yeah.
The other option that my heart wanted is not believable.
Right.
And I'm sorry, Tess, that I would put you through that. But I'm assuming beyond that, they sleep and it's the next day. And Joel wakes up. Tess is already awake, and she's making tea or coffee. I don't know. She's stirring one or the other. Either way, she shares a drink with him and begins to tell him about what happened. And Joel finally looks up, sees her face, the swollen eye, which is a little bit better today. And she's, cleaned up her mouth and stuff like that. He gets overprotective instantly.
Yeah.
Grabs a bottle of alcohol, of liquor, dabs at it, tries to clean her up. Because that's his way of showing affection. And she explains how she's been in federal lockup all day because he notes that the wounds that she has are not brand new or fresh. So basically, where were you? What happened? Why didn't you come get me? But
that's right.
Tess tells Joel here that Robert sold their merch, this battery, and that Robert is ultimately terrified of Joel, and she makes these false promises, but basically don't go and be a battering ram, Joel. Don't be a blunt instrument and scare Robert off because we still need our merch.
Yeah.
To be methodical about this versus a bull in a china shop. So they make a plan together. And
my favorite part about this was, I think this was the part where Tess was like, now I promised Robert that you wouldn't hurt him, but I would very much like you to hurt him.
Yes.
And I was like,
good.
I love Anna Torv so much.
Do you
the delivery was so good.
That sequence I learned on the official podcast, that sequence was the first day of filming for Anna Torv.
Oh, really? So yeah, that was her first. That's, I mean, if that is, I have no reason to assume that is not true. She slipped into that role like a glove. It was like a well-worn shoe. Wow. Very, very great. Loved it.
It was wonderful. Anna, you wonderful, wonderful woman. We adore you in this role. So we're introduced finally to Marlene here. And the Fireflies, her subordinates, essentially, are questioning the point of this plan. What is the point of them bombing here? Like, what is going on? And it's this woman named Kim that is questioning Marlene. And now there's two other Fireflies beside her, clearly of lesser rank. And Marlene just, tells them to get gone. And they go.
Yeah. Follow orders.
Yes.
Yeah.
To follow fucking orders. Like, just that's the end of, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. But Marlene realizes or makes it apparent to Kim that what they're doing is strategic bombing to keep Fedra out of a certain section of the city, because Marlene and the remaining Fireflies are working on an exodus to leave the quarantine zone permanently.
Yeah.
And Kim kind of questions this a little bit, like why? But then this cryptic message that came in from the guy at the radio tower, so 73K Orlando, apparently also handed Marlene a message that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't talk about it just yet because
Sure.
we promise no spoilers.
Yeah.
But it was
We only have an idea of what it is, by the way. We don't know for sure, but
yeah,
there is an idea.
There's an idea amongst people who have played the games of what this could mean. And if that is that, it would certainly be enough to get the reaction from Kim that happened.
Yeah.
Because she's just kind of like, oh, you know, okay, no, I get it. I understand. I'm going to follow fucking orders now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then a quick little like tie-up sequence. We're outside again.
Sure.
Joel is just kind of standing amongst everyone.
He's just kind of checking stuff out. Just like,
checking stuff out.
Just like, all right, just doing guy shit. Just checking shit out.
Yeah. The doing guy shit will never be trampled no matter what happens to the earth. But
that's right.
A firefly, we don't know this yet, but a man approaches Joel to sell him on the mission of the fireflies. But Joel just like, if you tell me to look for the light, I will break your fucking jaw. Essentially.
It was so funny. The dude just shuts up and walks away. He's like, well,
yeah, it just walks away.
Great acting from that guy. Just a great. Okay.
But it was kind of interesting though, because if you don't, I mean, we understand that the fireflies have to follow orders from Marlene, you know, then passed down through the ranks and the chain of command and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But if this guy is still recruiting for the Fireflies, he clearly doesn't know of the plan to leave the QZ that same day. So it's interesting to see kind of the cracks or the faults in this structure of the Fireflies, and inevitably what happens later on in this episode to a lot of them.
Sure.
In my humble opinion.
Right. That's it.
Yeah, but Tess got intel on Robert, where to find them, where they need to be, and then they set off.
Okay. Mm-hmm. From here, we cut back to where Ellie, or Veronica, rather, is being held. Marlene opens the door. Ellie was, doing what you would do if you were chained to something, like, just fuck, come on. Can't get out. Ellie gets tossed. Veronica gets tossed her backpack, really quickly rifles through it, pulls out a switchblade, like opens it up.
Yeah.
Right. Marlene sits down right next to her.
Yeah.
Clear within range. Like Ellie could easily shank her with this thing.
Yeah.
Right. She's like, oh, you're not scared? No. Mm-hmm. This interaction is really pretty special between these two. Mm-hmm. Marlene calls Ellie on her bullshit. That's pretty funny. We learn about. We get the line, "Is it going to happen?" Right? Mm-hmm. Ellie asks Marlene, "Is it going to happen?" Mm-hmm. And Marlene shakes her head, "No."
Yeah.
It's not. Ellie then gets outed, right? And we get what I believe is the line of the episode. I don't know if we should have a line of the episode section of this show,
maybe.
But we get the... Your name's not Veronica. Your name is Ellie. And it cuts to Bella Ramsey. She's like, are you my fucking mom or something? And it was such a funny out of the blue line. Do I look like your mom? It was perfect.
Yeah.
The plan is, essentially, Marlene is telling her, the plan is to leave tonight. Get out of the city. You're coming with us. You are the reason we are leaving tonight. Mm-hmm. And then Marlene tells her everything. So we are with Joel and Tess now in a subway tunnel. We learned that the plan was to kind of sneak up on Robert. We take the subway tunnels to underneath this building and then go up through and sneak up on him so he doesn't jump town or anything like that, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. As they're making their way inside, they kind of push open this door. Tess goes first. She looks around, she turns, and she gets startled. And we see like a clicker. We don't know what this thing is. We see a man or a person that has kind of become one with the wall. It's very disturbing. There's fungi. There are mushrooms. It's like, it's some real horror movie shit.
Yeah.
they start talking about what could have happened. They say he wasn't here last time, or maybe I think then it's a follow-up, maybe what infected him was here, something along those lines, right? Generally, it would be very dangerous to be near this thing in the video game, but they seem to have determined that it's done, right? This is not a threat in this form right now. So there's that.
Which is interesting.
We get a brand. Yeah.
Like, what's the theory behind this? There has to be science behind it. Like, what happens to a mushroom and the mycelium beneath it, the hundreds of billions of miles of mycelium beneath it when it dies? Like,
I don't think that I don't think that the way I looked at that is the person is now just one with the, right? It's not that
where they end up, not necessarily nature, but just where they end up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's still a living thing. It's just not going to get up and run at you anymore. Right. I don't know for sure, but that seems to be the prevailing theory in my mind, at least. So we get a brand new podcast from Joel Miller, Construction Corner. Joel and Tess are climbing up between the walls between the bounding wall and the wall of rooms. Joel is commenting that, they must have done something here in the 80s in order to make more room to sell more apartments or something. It was like a very funny offhanded comment showing that he's like, I know one thing. I know about construction.
Construction Corner with Joel Miller. Yeah.
We get to a wall, like a false wall, essentially, and Tess tries to push on it, and it's a little bit of resistance here. She's like, did somebody put a piano in front of this thing? It's just like a very funny, again, that might be like a video game reference. At least I took it that way. They smell a little bit of gunpowder. They're like, you smell that? And they point their flashlights down. There's blood coming from underneath this false door. So Anna Torv Tess just rams it. We come to a hallway filled with dead bodies. One of them being Robert, who we met earlier. He's got a right in the cheek. Not a great way to go. Nope. And of course, the battery that they were attempting to purchase that he double sold is right there on the ground. And she determines this thing's worthless anyway. He sold this piece of shit twice. Yeah. And it doesn't work. Then we hear a little bit of a struggle happening from down the hallway.
Yeah. And let's talk about that struggle. No, I'm talking about, because this is the intro.
All right.
So this, just to kind of put a capstone on what we just talked about, comparing the video game for a hot second to Robert's death here, it was different. The choices behind that are a little curious for me, but overall, I feel like it was done to save time. To get to this next sequence of events, which were and are more important than ultimately what happened in the game between, the interactions with Tess, Joel, and Robert. So going from there, Ellie launches herself out of a room and tries to knife Joel immediately without even really knowing what's going on. Like, she knows that a lot of fireworks just happened in that hallway. And a lot of people died. They're all over the place. So, she's probably been hiding out, freaking the fuck out.
For clarification, and just so you and I are on the same page, that was the Fireflies in a shootout with Robert's men, right?
Yes.
Like, they realized the deal went bad, and then they started just shooting at each other. So all Robert and presumably all of his men are dead. And many of the Fireflies that we had seen just prior in this kind of hideout are also dead. It's a lot.
So, and it basically comes down to Marlene and Kim are left along with Ellie. So their numbers have drastically declined since the last time we were even with them. But Ellie is, in this sequence, Ellie's almost rabid. And in a few moments of this episode, she has this like unhinged vibe to her overall, which I'm really enjoying because it is different.
Yeah.
To a degree. But Joel's reaction to her coming at him, he just tosses her, literally launches her to the other side of the hallway, and she hits the wall and drops right down to the ground. it is a rough meeting for our Joel and Ellie. Like, it's not great.
Yeah.
But, you know, and he basically commandeers her blade by putting his boot over top of it. And I wrote a little line here. I was like, everyone needed this battery. And I really think that the main star of episode 1 was this fucking battery.
The battery, yeah, the car battery.
Everybody wanted it. Like, Marlene needed it, Joel needed it. And then Robert was trying to sell it and then sell it to fucking someone else. I was like, this battery is just the true red carpet star here. But we hear in this sequence from Marlene talking to Joel and Tess that Tommy turned against Joel, or at least that's what Joel thinks here. And, you know, we've deduced that it was Robert's men attacking the Fireflies and the Fireflies attacking Robert's men because of a deal gone sour. So hopefully that is the case. If we are wrong, please let us know. And I laughed here because Kim definitely got told by her boss, Queen Firefly, because Kim is missing an ear. And she's volunteering herself to take Ellie to this place that has Fireflies stationed there. All that Tess and Joel have to do is get Ellie, aka Cargo, to this next location, and that's it. Done. You know, mission done, quest completed. And Kim is volunteering, but she's missing an ear, and I fucking laughed so much. And I want to talk about this real quick, that Marlene was like, you have no fucking ear on your fucking head, Kim. Like, it is such a real reaction. Yeah, like, calm down, dude. It is such a reaction because Marlene is also hurt in this sequence. She has some sort of abdomen, gunshot wound to her lower left abdomen. And, you know, as she says, she's literally bleeding out. But
that was very funny, too. She, you know, as she's talking, I mean, we're going to get to it in a second, but like she poses this. She was like, here's the deal. You want a car? I'll give you a truck.
Yeah.
Forget about a battery. I'll give you a truck.
Yeah.
If you get this girl where she needs to go. And like Joel and Tess are like, all right,
well, let's talk.
A little powwow.
Let's talk.
And like, she's like, keep in mind, I'm bleeding out.
Yeah.
it was like a very
real.
I love. Yeah. It was beautifully done. Yeah.
It really it's this show is very relatable and identifiable. If we put ourselves in those situations, these are the things that we would say.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, the dialogue is just 100% across the board, 100%. And speaking of dialogue, so as Marlene is talking of what's going to happen and that Ellie has to go with Joel and Tess, she talks of their capabilities and how she knows what they're capable of. And Ellie kind of reveals a little bit of her innocence here when she questions, like she looks back and forth between Joel and Tess and then to Marlene, like, what are they capable of? And I really love that because it is a testament to her age, even though we're seeing her, again, in this like really rabid state sometimes, like trying to rip the chain off of the radiator and screaming and just this protestation in her, which we love because that's Ellie. She has those moments of, I don't really know much because I'm fucking 14, dude, you know, and it's expert storytelling and dialogue and acting all coming together, and it's wonderful. And speaking of that, Ellie just moves on to asshole to Joel when he boots her knife, her blade down the hallway. And again, I say, what a meeting for our main people in this entire story and franchise. But Marlene certainly has this natural leadership charge to her, and I think it's more present in the show than it was in the game. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily because she has more time on screen in the show than she did in the games, but there was also an interview with Merle Dandridge, who portrayed Marlene in the game and came back to play her in the show, which is just absolutely beautiful and wonderful. And Merle talks about how she was able to grow into this character, not only just her age, but in a very like identifiable sense. She grew with this character over the last 10 years, 11 for her. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it shows very clearly on the screen whenever her character is present. And and then this whole sequence ends with basically her saying to Joel, like, don't fuck it up. You know, she turns off the kid gloves that she's using with Ellie and just deadpans him with a very serious, don't mess this up. And this speaks volumes to, again, her leadership and her recognition of what people are capable of, but also how the quarantine zone views Joel and Tess to an extent. There's a whole lot going on in that hallway.
Yeah, a lot of backstory between these characters. They know each other. They knew each other at first glance.
Yeah.
And then it's clear that they know even more about each other. Tommy, for instance, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. You can go.
So we have Joel, Tess, and Ellie. How about that? Some squishy chucks, right? Yeah. Not built for anything but style, really. Yeah. Not Ellie rocking the chucks. We are back at Joel's apartment, okay? We have an Ellie, what the fuck moment?
Yeah, when they slam the door, she's like, "We need to talk," as the door shuts. What the fuck?
They essentially let Ellie in, and then as she goes in, they close the door, and it's just like, what the fuck? Like, look, peeking out as the door closes. It was really, really nice. Yeah. We see Ellie is drawn to music, right? She's checking the apartment out. She's looking around. She comes across a book, which I believe was the Billboard Top 100 for every decade, maybe something. It was a big tome of music, which was pretty cool. It's the first thing she starts paging through, right? Joel comes in. We see that Tess does not follow him, right? So she's off somewhere. Yeah. We learn Ellie, as soon as Joel comes in, she asks about who Bill and Frank are, which is interesting. Yeah. The Bill Frank code. I'm guessing that note, something in that note or in that book. She's paging through the book. She comes across a note. Somewhere else in that book had to have been the names Bill and Frank that we just didn't see.
Yeah, because for her to deduce just like B/F is Bill and Frank. Like,
right. I'm sure there was something there, but she also, she's also figuring out this code, which is playing songs from certain decades indicates X, Y, or Z, right? So we had 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that I thought it was pretty cool. Do we have, I don't know if we have those notes. It was, the 60s were nothing, right?
60s,
nothing new.
Nothing in stock.
70s, there's a delivery.
Yes.
Or something along those lines. And then the 80s had nothing.
Just a red X.
And she was, and she's like, what does the 80s mean? And Joel just ignores her, right? Joel's going to kill some time, right? While we wait for Tess to come back from whatever mission she is on. So he just kind of lays down on the couch. He's like, I'm gonna conk out for, we don't know how often this guy sleeps. We see that he passes out in a drunken high stupor occasionally, but what's a nap look like for Joel? We don't know. Bad dreams. This guy has some bad dreams. There is a conversation that happens when he wakes up between Joel and Ellie. She says, "You mumble in your sleep," I believe is the word.
A lot of this is canon from the game too. Just like some of it was left in, some of it was not.
Yeah. We see that it is nighttime now. Ellie is sitting by a window looking out, and it is nighttime. She actually remarks about how dark it is beyond the borders of the wall that they're in, which is very, very cool. We don't see that just yet, but it's an interesting thing to try to visualize. She also mentions a song came on the radio, and Joel's like, what is it? And she's like, I don't know, something about like wake me up before you go. And Joel's like, oh shit. He gets, and she's like, 80s means in trouble, like, or 80s means trouble or something like that. So it never happened. She just needed to figure out what it meant for the 80s. So that was pretty great. She figured out the code. Yeah, she's a smart cookie. She is. We find out that Tess went to go check the route they'll have to take. She's back now, and it is time to go.
It is time to go. And Joel, Ellie, and Tess are now leaving or intent on leaving the quarantine zone. And they do this by, once again, they go burrowing down, because that seems to be the way to do this. And they lift a broken slab of asphalt, which acts as a hatch. And that's so fucking clever.
So good.
Because
it's real good.
And this isn't spoilery, but in the game they use like pallets or like boards or doors, and it's like, I wonder what's this? Just random door hiding under there,
Yeah.
but this is reality. You would absolutely reinforce some sort of asphalt to work as a hatch, and that's what they did, and I've absolutely loved it. But Ellie is immediately excited to be outside and literally stands up and almost compromises the entire thing.
So
Almost.
funny.
And
So
yeah,
funny.
Tess's reaction versus Joel's were just so in character. Tess just kind of like brings her down. She's like, Jesus Christ. And Joel just looks and shakes his head like, Jesus Christ. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Um, and they proceed from here by sneaking under buses, and we got some wall crouching, which is true to Joel in the game with his enormous thighs. So it was good to see it carried on over here. But
Wow.
yes, but Tess and Ellie hold on to one another here as they think they're about to be found. Like, periodically we'll see a light pass by or a truck pass by, and the
Yeah.
physicality is always interesting to me in these games because these people don't know each other, and yet they're like, it's not like an aggressive hold either. So I
Mhm.
like that. Um, I think that there are closer connections being established here faster, and at least faster than I anticipated, but I don't think I'm alone in that because I've seen a few people talking about it here and there on the internet since last night.
Yeah.
But yeah, and as an aside, like the cinematography in this entire show has been god tier. But even so much to the so much so, that's what I was trying to say. So much so that them walking through a sewage pipe that
Mhm.
is, I don't think it's in use. It's like one of those like above ground ones where they're just like, "Oh, we don't need this." Like leftover at a
Yeah.
construction site kind of thing. Um it's this stunning shot, and I said it to you out loud, of a Fedra truck's or no, a Fedra helicopter going overhead
Mhm.
with its spotlight beaming down on the ground below them. And Tess, Joel, and Ellie stop in this pipe, and there's a shot of Tess slash Anna Torv with this light hitting her like a quarter of her face, and it's fucking stunning. And I was
Yeah.
like,
It's one of those great shots, but they just threw it away. You
yeah,
only see it for just a
it,
moment,
and then it's
really.
gone.
And
So
yeah,
if you guys have a chance, just go back and check that out. It's gorgeous.
one perfect
Yeah.
frame. I'll put it in the video version. Let's salt the tip jar. Let's say, hey, subscribe to us on YouTube. You'll actually see some of these things we're describing. How about
Well,
that?
yes, but maybe not either because I feel like the video might be taken down. HBO is a little tough with stuff like that. So we have to talk about that off air.
Nah, we'll be
So
fine.
it may
We'll
be
be
in
fine.
there and it may not be in there. Don't hold us to it, guys. But so we come up to a Fedra soldier pissing against a wall, and this is just a hilarious sequence in the beginning because he sees these people out of the corner of his eye, and his like his piece is still out, and he's still pissing, and he's like fumbling with himself, like, oh fuck, and
So much
then
body armor. I can't. Oh, shit.
yeah, like it's just not working out for this guy.
I pissed on myself. Shit.
But then he turns around and he raises his assault rifle at the three of them until it dawns on him that it's Joel.
Mhm.
And he lifts the visor on his helmet, but immediately we can tell that this doesn't change anything. The fact that it's Joel does not change a single thing.
Yeah.
And
This is the guy that he was dealing drugs to at the beginning
yes,
of the episode. It's the
mhm,
same exact soldier.
yeah, who told him to stay off the streets.
Right.
And now, not only is he off the streets, they're like right at the line between the contaminated area and the actual quarantine zone. So it's like this guy is just pissed off.
Yeah.
And we can kind of see if you pay attention to Ellie in part of this sequence, like she's getting switchblade happy already. Like the girl is like itchy switchblade finger.
Mhm.
And so the Fedra soldier demands that they all get out down on their knees, and Tess is the first one to acquiesce here. She's like, just get down on your knees, just do it. And he does the cordyceps test. So he breaks out the meter, and they're all just kind of like, really? And he's like, no, I'm doing this by the books.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though that the guy just kind of flipped a switch from, dealing with Joel earlier in the day to now I'm going to do things by the book. And I'm
Mhm.
assuming it's just because of everything happening in the city, and he will be held accountable and probably killed if he did anything opposite of this.
Yeah.
So again, we learn that there are hangings for unauthorized exits, and it's confirmed here again. But in a very quick turn of events, Ellie stabs this guy. And how the whole exchange happens, the guy rips the blade out, tosses it on the ground, but it pits Joel between Ellie and this Fedra soldier. And then we have this really quick flashback of Sarah.
Mm.
And I wouldn't even necessarily call it a flashback. I don't think it serves as a flashback. It's a PTSD flash because Joel
Sure.
is instantly triggered back to that moment where this soldier shot him and his daughter died. And he did not do anything about it then. So he does something about it now. And
Oh boy, does he.
he literally launches himself with this cry, like a guttural cry, roar, growl, I don't even, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
and beats this guy to death
Yeah.
in a matter of 30 seconds. Like the guy is done. He's gone. Bye. And Ellie watches this unfold. And the word that was used by Craig Mazin on both the post interview after the show on HBO and also in the podcast was Ellie was activated because someone is defending her.
Mhm.
Like, she doesn't have to ask for it. She's not getting in trouble for something. She's not getting remanded for something. She's not being talked down to. None of it. This person, this stranger, just innately defended her.
Yeah.
And when Joel turns around to look at her, he sees that she's completely unafraid. That she's like, I saw the expression on Twitter, Ellie lit up like a firework on the 4th of July, seeing Joel do that for her. And I think that that's really appropriate.
Yeah, that's good direction too. Truly, a little bit opposite of what I had even anticipated, but I didn't. I was like, oh, that's an interesting direction to go.
Yes, fully. And it makes, in comparison to what Sarah felt watching her dad kill someone, Sarah saw horror and she started crying. But Joel turns around in an almost like natural, unbeknownst to him, to see Ellie's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the complete polar opposite of his daughter's.
Yes.
And just kind of getting ahead a little bit, like they're, one of the big things with Joel and Ellie, which both works for them and then works to, a little fucking gnat just flew on my nose. Like, bitch, I'm podcasting. But it works for their relationship, but also in a sense condemns their relationship is their level of codependency.
Mm-hmm.
And it started right there. Like that was the moment, that was the triggering moment for Joel, and it was the triggering moment for Ellie. And I think I'm very interested to see how the pacing of their um relationship proceeds from here.
Yeah.
In regards to the song that plays shortly that we'll talk about in a second. But to finish off the scene, so Tess and Joel learn that Ellie is now infected, and Tess is horrified. Like she has a moment of just sheer panic as she
Yeah.
yells for Joel. And Ellie just kind of quickly shows her tendril mark,
Mm-hmm.
not her bite mark, her tendril mark, and just like, no, 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 it's 3 weeks old. It's 3 weeks old, just trying for them to hear her in the
Yeah.
midst of everything that's happened. And Joel is basically not hearing anything at all because he's slipping between the past and the present still.
Yeah.
But Tess is like, we have to fucking leave. We have to go. And they all run, fearing for their lives because Fedra is drawing closer at this point. And they exit through a hole in the fence. And the last thing that we see before the wide sweeping shot is that they're heading into the contaminated area. Before the show closes, it cuts back to the apartment for one last time.
Mm-hmm.
And the radio switches on, and
Yeah.
Depeche Mode's Never Let Me Down Again begins to play. And that is a song from the
Ooh.
80s, so clearly there is trouble. There's a raging thunderstorm, and then we hear this cry, this shriek, and we can see some sort of infected on the edge of the roof. And it was so impactful.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can compare it to is the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. If you understand what I'm saying, then you understand what I'm saying. That's what it felt like seeing that. And I'm not going to talk about what it is. We know what it is, but we're not spoiling on this show. So we'll find out soon enough, likely in the next episode because it's called Infected. But that is how this episode ends. So holy shit.
I think it's worth noting before we get too far away from it, I sent this to you.
Yes, you did.
The lyrics to the song Never Let Me Down Again.
Mm-hmm.
Music plays a important role in the universe of The Last of Us. Not necessarily like needle drops, but certainly there are songs that permeate. I just wanted to read, I have just one set of lyrics from this song that I think are worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking a ride with my best friend. I hope he never lets me down again. He knows where he's taking me where I want to be. I'm taking a ride with my best friend.
It's impactful, and
Yeah.
going to the companion podcast, that was the last thing they talked about, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say too much of what they said, but it is so intrinsic to the relationship that we will see unfold on this
Mm-hmm.
season of The Last of Us and in the game. And this song could not be more perfectly suited. And that's all I'll say.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if every episode has like a needle drop, even if it's the closing song of
Yeah.
the, you know, and that's certainly something to keep your eyes and ears on, to say like, let's listen closely to this song and hear what it's telling us, because it might just be the thing that is a great clue for what happens next. So
Perfect.
that's so cool. So cool.
Yeah. So that's the end of the show.
We
We
did
are
it.
highly anticipating episode 2 now in less than a week because it's Monday. And it just to say a couple words, I can't wait to see what happens next. Can't wait to see this story unfold. I'm very excited to be on this journey with you, Andrew, and with everyone else who decides to tune in and listen to us. We hope you like what we did with this show. This is kind of how the format will go. We might go a little faster in certain sequences in the future. We might go a little slower depending on what we are talking about. But this is how Andrew and I break down The Last of Us and our bread and butter. So we hope you enjoy it. And
Yeah.
a little bit of contact info for us. And then I'll leave the call to arms for you, Andrew. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you would like to follow along on this journey, see some videos, some photographs posted, some behind the scenes things here and there, you can do that by going over to Instagram for the TLOU podcasts. That's our username over there. You can follow us on Twitter at TLOU podcast, where it'll be a mix of Wayfaring Strangers and The Last Cast. Same for the Instagram. I neglected to say that when I was talking about Instagram. I'm sorry. If you would like to check out our website, that's tloupodcast.com. We are also in the middle of doing a travel series on Wayfaring West, called Wayfaring West, excuse me, where we are endeavoring to go to all of the locations that are set in the games. But now we're going to have to add the show locations as well, people.
What?
So,
Unbelievable.
yeah. So if you'd like to see the first episode of that and read about it a little bit, that's over on the website as well at tloupodcast.com. If you would go to our YouTube, because that's pretty important as well, you can just look us up over there at TLOU Podcast, and it will take you exactly where you have to go. And you can watch a couple past episodes of Wayfaring Strangers. This is kind of a recent thing we're doing with YouTube. If you'd like to follow me, you can do that everywhere at Jaded Vader. If you'd like to follow Andrew, you can do that everywhere at Dark Driving. Come and say hi. Tell them that the last cast sent you. And yes, Andrew, call to arms, please.
Oh, yeah. Hey, my name's Andrew. This is The Last Cast. If you found us because you maybe came from Wayfaring Strangers, or if you just did a quick Google search for TLOU Podcast or The Last of Us Podcast and you came across us, hi, hello. Thank you for listening, especially if you've gotten this far. Do us a favor. Rate and review the show.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you don't even have to review the show necessarily, but if you just smash that 5-star button, it helps in the algorithms. It helps kind of bubble us up to the top.
Yeah.
Gives us that hit of dopamine that we're looking for, so we're not screaming into the void every week. But overall, if you're using Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Google, wherever you're listening, just hit that 5-star button. And if you have the time, 2 minutes to write something really nice, we'll read it on the next show.
Yeah.
Combine that with all of the contact information. You know how to get in touch with us.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy you're here.
Yes. We love that you're here. And that's something that Andrew and I are it's very important to us with our podcast is to acknowledge the people that watch our shows, listen to our shows. If you're going to take the time to write us, we're going to take the time to give that back to you. This is a two-way street. So,
Reciprocal.
yes. Andrew, would you like to do the outro or would you want me to do it this week?
You do it.
Oh God.
You wrote it.
I did
You do
write it.
it.
And I don't know why I did this, but I said, sorry about this, I guess. Not sorry. But we'll be back next week making our way downtown, walking fast, clickers past, and they're hellbound. And that's it for the last kist when you're lost in the darkness. Bye, guys. We will be back next week.